I didn't move to Lakewood Ridge for drama. I came for peace, something hard to find after your wife is killed by a drunk driver and you're left raising an 11-year-old boy alone. Fishing was how Eli and I held on to each other during the worst year of our lives. It gave us a ritual, a rhythm, a reason to leave the house when the silence inside became too loud. The lake was supposed to be our new start. The real estate agent had practically sung its praises: serene views, family-friendly activities, fishing permitted for residents, and a well-kept community. I was skeptical of the mention of an HOA, but she'd waved it off. Just standard stuff, she said with a rehearsed smile. Paint colors, lawn care, nothing serious. I should have caught the warning signs when she added, almost under her breath, but the HOA president, Melinda Braxley, she runs a tight ship. We moved in 3 weeks before the incident. I'd barely unpacked the last box when I noticed the HOA welcome letter taped to the door. It had rules, pages of them. No political flags. No solar panels unless pre-approved. Trash bins must be rolled out no earlier than 6 a.m. and removed by 7 p.m. I skimmed it and moved on. What mattered to me was that the lake was just 2 blocks away, and Eli had smiled when he saw it. That was rare. I hadn't seen a real smile on his face in months. It was a Saturday morning when we finally made it out to the dock. The air was cool, sunlight filtering gently through the pines that ringed the water. I handed Eli his rod, and we baited our lines in silence, the way we always had. No talking needed. Just the gentle lap of water, the occasional bird call, and the sound of the line being cast. We had been there for maybe 30 minutes when Eli caught his first fish. A small one, bluegill, probably, but he beamed like he'd reeled in a shark. I helped him unhook it, and he gently let it back into the water. "Think Mom saw that one?" he asked quietly. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Then came the sound that would become all too familiar, a high-pitched electric whine. A golf cart. I turned and saw her, late 50s, platinum blonde helmet of hair, oversized sunglasses, a monogrammed clipboard resting on her lap like it was the Constitution. Her name tag read Melinda Braxley, HOA president. She drove the cart like a cop on patrol. And judging by her expression, she was ready to write a ticket. She rolled to a stop right at the head of the dock, adjusted her sunglasses, and barked out a question without a hint of hello. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" I turned fully around and offered a friendly smile, shielding Eli slightly with my body. "Just fishing with my son. We just moved into the corner house on Pine Grove, Nathan Cole." I extended a hand. She didn't take it. Instead, she tapped something on her clipboard. "Fishing is prohibited. This is a clear violation of HOA Guideline 14C subsection 3. You'll receive a notice in the mail. The fine is $750. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "The realtor told me fishing was allowed. That's why she cut me off. The guidelines were updated last month. Email notification was sent to all residents. It's not my fault if you failed to read your welcome packet." Eli looked up at me, worried. "Dad, are we in trouble?" I knelt beside him. "No, buddy. We're fine." Then I turned back to Melinda. "Can you show me the specific guideline? I don't recall seeing that change." She raised her clipboard and flipped through several laminated sheets before thrusting one toward me. Sure enough, the print read, "Due to environmental and safety concerns, fishing is no longer permitted from common docks or lakefront property." I noticed the date, a month ago, and in fine print, effective immediately. "This doesn't make sense," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "This lake was one of the main selling points. It's in all the promotional material." "Then I suggest you take it up with your realtor," Melinda snapped. "Meanwhile, the fine stands." I could see Eli's hands shaking as he reeled in his line. "We weren't hurting anyone," he whispered. I turned to him. "I know, kiddo. Let's pack it up." Melinda stood by, watching us with the satisfaction of a mall cop who'd caught a shoplifter. "Please ensure future compliance, Mr. Cole," she called out as we walked back up the dock. We run a very orderly community here. The walk back to the house was silent except for the crunch of gravel under our shoes. Eli's eyes were on the ground. I tried to come up with something light to say, something to lift the weight from his shoulders, but nothing came. When we got home, he went straight to his room. I sat down at my desk, pulled out my laptop, and started combing through every HOA document in the welcome packet. Nothing was signed. No acknowledgement. Just a flood of restrictions and addendums buried in legalese. I checked my email inbox. Nothing. I checked my spam folder. Still nothing. No notification about the fishing ban. That's when I remembered the open house flyer, the one the realtor had shown me when we first visited. I dug it out from the file drawer. There it was. Enjoy access to Lakewood Ridge scenic private lake for fishing, kayaking, and peaceful morning walks. I snapped a photo of it. Then I pulled up the HOA's Facebook page. That's where I found it, pictures from 3 weeks ago. A lakeside barbecue hosted by Melinda Braxley herself. People fishing, drinks in hand, even a portable speaker set up on the dock. I zoomed in and recognized one of the men holding a fishing rod, Melinda's son, according to the photo tag. I felt the slow burn of anger start to build in my chest. Not just because of the hypocrisy, but because of Eli. That lake was the one place he had smiled without trying to. And some clipboard tyrant had stolen that moment from him with a smirk and a fine. I stared at the picture of her party for a long moment before saving it to a folder titled HOA Inconsistencies. I wasn't the kind of man to explode or rant on social media. I was the kind who built a case, brick by brick, until it was impossible to ignore. And that's when I made a quiet promise to myself. She thought she was dealing with just another rule-breaking resident. She had no idea she'd just find the wrong man. The next morning, I started early. There was no room for assumptions now. I brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened a clean document titled Timeline of Violations. If Melinda Braxley wanted to fine me for imagined infractions, I'd fine her right back, with facts, photos, and proof. First, I needed to understand who I was dealing with. I visited the county property records and typed in her name. It wasn't long before I found that her house, one of the largest in the neighborhood, was registered under an entity called Elmwave Partners, LLC. That name meant nothing to me at first. But after some digging, I saw a pattern. At least 7 homes in Lakewood Ridge were owned by the same LLC, all purchased within the last 3 years. 3 of those homes, according to archived listings, had previously belonged to residents who'd been repeatedly fined by the HOA before mysteriously putting their houses on the market. That couldn't be a coincidence. Next, I searched through HOA meeting minutes, public records buried on the community website under outdated file names and password-protected archives. I cracked the login using the generic HOA 2020 password from the welcome packet. That alone told me how lax their digital security was. Inside the minutes, I saw endless entries led by Melinda, proposals for stricter front yard decor policies, motions for increasing late fine penalties, restrictions on porch furniture colors. Most of the votes were unanimous. Either the board was stacked with her supporters, or everyone else had been too tired or afraid to speak up. I needed someone who knew the internal mechanics of this place. I remembered something Eli had said, that his friend Lana's dad used to be a city inspector and had gotten into it with the HOA. I asked Eli to invite Lana over for lemonade and games. I didn't tell him what I was really after. When Lana's father, Tony Bressler, dropped her off, I asked him if he had a few minutes. We sat on my back porch while the kids played in the yard. Tony was a wide-shouldered man in his 50s with weathered hands and a permanent squint, like someone always bracing for a lie. He didn't need much prompting. As soon as I mentioned Melinda Braxley, he leaned forward like he'd been waiting years to unload. "You know she fined me $1,200 for having mismatched roof shingles after a storm," he said. "Said it was a visual hazard. Then her cousin's landscaping company tried to sell me roof replacement for double the market rate." I raised an eyebrow. "Cousin?" He nodded. "She's got family tucked into every pocket around here. From board members to contractors. And if you don't play along, she buries you in violations until you give up. I know 3 couples who sold their homes because of her. Quiet sales. All cash. Through that shell company of hers. I told him what I'd discovered about Elmwave Partners. He just nodded grimly and muttered, "That tracks." I showed him the screenshot of her son fishing at the lake during the recent party. He actually chuckled. "You got her," he said. "She's been pushing for exclusive HOA control over the lake for years. But here's the part most folks don't know, the HOA doesn't actually own the lake. Not yet. It's leased." That caught my attention. Leased from who? Tony stood up and stretched his back. It was built by a developer called Greenwood Property Trust. They plan to hold the lake under a 20-year lease, then either sell it to the HOA or the city. The lease runs out next month. After that, the owner can sell it to anyone who makes a serious offer. That was the crack in the wall. I knew it right then. That lake wasn't just water and trees. It was a battlefield. And the fight wasn't over fish hooks or bait smell. Melinda wanted it. She was orchestrating everything around that lake, the bans, the fines, the fake environmental concerns, all to secure sole control before the ownership window closed. After Tony left, I went into full recon mode. I launched my drone, nothing fancy, just a quiet mid-range quadcopter with a high-res camera. I flew it low, looping the lake perimeter. In less than 10 minutes, I had footage of 3 different residents fishing from their docks, none of whom had been fined. One had a small cooler of beer beside him. Another had loud music playing. These weren't random acts of rule-breaking, they were people Melinda didn't touch. Probably her supporters or enablers. I saved the footage and backed it up twice. Next, I wrote a letter posing as an interested investor from out of state. Using a fresh Gmail account and a VPN, I sent an inquiry to Greenwood Property Trust, asking about the availability and purchase process for the lake parcel at Lakewood Ridge. I didn't expect a reply right away, but I got one within hours. A polite legal assistant wrote back, "Greenwood is currently in discussions regarding the transition of the Lakewood Ridge parcel. We welcome competitive offers and are seeking buyers with the ability to close within 45 days. That sealed it. Melinda wasn't just posturing, she was trying to buy the lake. And unless someone got there first, she'd do it, lock it down, and reshape this entire neighborhood into her own gated empire. That evening, I made a decision. I called my financial advisor and asked how quickly I could liquidate part of my long-term fund. I didn't say why, just that it was urgent. Then I called a friend from my military days, a former real estate attorney who owed me a favor, and asked how fast an LLC could be formed for a private purchase. By the time the sun set, the wheels were already turning. As I stood in the backyard with Eli watching fireflies flicker near the tree line, he asked softly, "Are we gonna move again, Dad?" I looked down at him and shook my head. "No, son. Not this time. We're not the ones who need to leave." He didn't say anything more, but he leaned against my side, and I felt him breathe out a long, tired sigh like he'd been carrying a weight for weeks. I didn't tell him the full plan yet. But I knew I was building something for him, something bigger than revenge. A place where he could cast his line without fear, without judgment, and without clipboard tyrants ruining his smile. It wasn't just a fight anymore. It was personal. It was justice. And it was just getting started. For the next 2 weeks, my life became a mixture of quiet war planning and strategic patience. During the day, I played the role of the unbothered new neighbor, waving politely, watering the lawn, helping Eli with his school project on aquatic ecosystems. At night, I gathered intelligence. I had spreadsheets tracking each property purchased by Elmwave Partners, time-stamped violation logs from neighbors, satellite maps of the lake, and even a separate file of HOA meeting audio recordings someone anonymously emailed me from a burner account. I didn't know who sent them, but I had my guess. The files revealed how deep the manipulation went. In one clip, Melinda's voice casually joked about fining someone for decorative gnomes just to get them to move along. Another clip had a discussion about pushing uncooperative elements further from the lake. The term she used, aesthetic inconsistency, was code for families she didn't like or people who spoke up. It wasn't just about order. It was about control. Everything Melinda did had a long-term goal, and the lake was her prize. Meanwhile, I created an LLC called Trident Holdings, with my friend Brian listed as the managing agent. From the outside, it was a completely separate entity. No digital trace tied it to me. Brian even flew in for one weekend to take a few staged photos in front of local properties for our website. He was a tech guy with a laid-back style and a mischievous grin, and he loved the secrecy of the mission. "Feels like I'm back in covert ops," he said, laughing, as we drafted a formal offer letter for the lake. We pitched $310,000, cash, with a 30-day closing. Greenwood responded with interest and requested proof of funds. I sent a letter from my investment advisor confirming the capital. 2 days later, we had a preliminary agreement signed. The lake and a 15-foot perimeter around it were now legally pending transfer to Trident Holdings. The deed would be finalized within the month. I had done it. Quietly. Precisely. And most importantly, before Melinda could. But I didn't reveal it yet. Timing mattered. I wanted her to keep showing her hand. I wanted her to keep pushing her special assessment plan, raising fees, talking big at HOA meetings, all while thinking the lake was still hers to win. And she did exactly that. At the next public HOA meeting, which I attended while pretending to browse my phone, Melinda stood confidently at the front of the community center, presenting a slideshow titled A Premier Vision for Lakewood Ridge. She talked about redesigning the shoreline, adding a members-only boathouse, building a cafe that served brunch on weekends, and installing surveillance cameras for lake security. She spun it as a beautification project, claiming it would raise property values and enhance community prestige. She asked for resident support of a temporary monthly fee increase of $75 per household, starting immediately. No vote. Just a slide and a smile. I watched faces around the room shift. Some people nodded, clearly part of her inner circle. Others looked confused. A few whispered. One man raised his hand and asked about the exact budget, but she deflected. "This is just a proposal phase. Once ownership is formalized, we'll present the formal numbers." Formalized. That word triggered something in me. She didn't know the ownership had already slipped through her fingers. I looked over at Tony Bressler, who gave me a knowing nod. We were getting close. But Melinda wasn't done. 3 days later, I received a new violation notice in my mailbox. This time, it was for improper grass trimming. According to the citation, my front lawn had a 3-inch variance near the driveway edge. The notice included close-up photos clearly taken from ground level. Someone had physically come onto my property, measured my lawn, and documented it. Another citation came the next day. My mailbox was supposedly a 1/4 inch too low, even though it had passed inspection during purchase. Then another, a bird feeder Eli had hung in the backyard, was deemed a hazard to avian migration. I wasn't the only one being targeted. Janine, the single mom who joined our group, got cited for non-standard trash bin placement. Raymond was fined for an unauthorized flagpole, which had stood in his yard for 5 years without issue. Melinda had launched a counterattack. But it only fueled our side. Our group chat, which we'd kept secure and invite-only, started growing. New members joined every week. We had over 30 residents sharing violations, patterns, and screenshots. Samuel, a retired banker who'd quietly observed the HOA for years, created a map linking citations to proximity to the lake and known political opposition to Melinda. The results were undeniable. The closer your house was to the lake, the more you were fined, unless you were on her preferred list. Tony discovered that the landscaping company enforcing compliance inspections was owned by Melinda's nephew. It was all one big machine. Still, I waited. I needed one final push. Then, one afternoon, Eli came home crying. He didn't say anything at first, just handed me his backpack and went to his room. I followed quietly. He was curled on the bed, shoulders shaking. When I sat beside him, he finally spoke. Everyone at school says we're the reason the lake's getting ruined. That we're causing problems. That we don't belong here. I felt something twist deep in my gut. These weren't just rules. This wasn't just a power game. This was her targeting a child. My son. I sat beside him in silence for a moment. Then I stood up, kissed the top of his head, and said softly, "All right. That's enough. Time to change the game." That night, I called Brian and told him we were moving to Phase 2. I signed the final paperwork for the lake transfer. I sent the documents to Greenwood. I wired the funds. The lake was ours. Officially. Legally. Quietly. While Melinda smiled at PowerPoint slides and sent out fines for grass height, I had bought the ground under her ambition. The water she wanted to claim. The dock where Eli caught his first fish in months. All of it. Mine. 2 days later, I scheduled a community cookout at the park bordering the lake. I used neutral language, welcome party, outdoor games, free food. We posted flyers. We handed out invites door to door. Melinda didn't know I was behind it. She approved the event without reading the organizer details. It was set for the same day she had planned to unveil her lake improvement renderings. That morning, I printed out 20 large photos, drone shots of residents fishing, screenshots of the HOA's own hypocrisy, and public records proving the lake transfer. I also printed one final image, a photo of Eli on the dock, smiling, holding up a tiny bluegill. Below it, a caption in plain black text, "All I wanted was to fish with my son. You fined me for it. So I bought the lake." The storm was coming, and she had no idea she was about to drown in it. The morning of the cookout was unusually calm, almost suspiciously so. The skies were clear, birds chirped along the shoreline, and the lake shimmered in the sun like it had no idea what kind of war had been quietly waged over it. I arrived early with Eli, carrying folding chairs, a portable grill, and a cooler filled with drinks. Janine and Tony showed up next, followed by Raymond and his wife, then Samuel with a stack of name tags and folding tables. There was laughter, small talk, and the scent of hot dogs rising into the breeze. You'd never guess that beneath this casual gathering lay the blueprint of a neighborhood revolution. What most of the residents didn't know, at least not yet, was that today wasn't just a picnic. It was the grand reveal. And Melinda Braxley was about to find out just how badly she'd underestimated the man she fined for fishing. By noon, half the community had shown up. Some came for the free food. Others were curious about the unannounced event. Most brought their kids, who immediately took to the lakeside games Eli and Lana had set up. I spotted Melinda arriving just after 1 o'clock in her usual fashion, tight floral blouse, oversized sunglasses, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 board members and a man I recognized as the town's zoning liaison. Her expression shifted the moment she saw the crowd. She wasn't used to unsanctioned popularity. She paused to whisper to the man beside her, then resumed her calculated walk toward the food table like a queen inspecting the peasants. I greeted her with a smile. "Lovely day for a cookout," I said. "Didn't expect to see you here." She gave a thin smile. "Yes, well, when someone hosts an event using community resources, the HOA should be present to ensure regulations are followed." I gestured to the volunteers around us. "Everyone here's a homeowner. We're just enjoying our lake. No violations. No disturbances." She frowned. "Our lake." I let that phrase hang there and simply handed her a folded envelope. "You might want to read that before you say anything else." She took it, glanced at the heading, "Property Deed Enclosed," and immediately walked toward a quieter corner. By the time she returned, her composure had cracked. It wasn't gone completely. Melinda was too proud to fall apart in public, but the tension in her jaw and the way she gripped her clipboard like a weapon betrayed her fury. I was standing near the microphone we'd set up for announcements and music when she approached. "This isn't valid," she said quietly, eyes blazing. "You can't do this." I picked up the microphone and tapped it. The speaker let out a soft echo across the park. All eyes turned toward us. I raised my hand in greeting. "Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the beautiful weather, the food, and the company. I want to take just a minute of your time for an important announcement. Melinda lunged forward as if to stop me, but I turned slightly, keeping the mic out of reach. As of this week, the lake, including the 15-foot perimeter of land surrounding it, is no longer leased to the HOA or Greenwood Property Trust. It was purchased by a private party through a fully legal transaction. That party is me. The ripple that passed through the crowd was immediate. Murmurs, gasps, and a few claps. I continued. Some of you may have heard rumors. Some may have wondered why the HOA's fishing ban was suddenly enforced, or why new assessments were pushed through without transparency. The truth is, the ban had nothing to do with environmental concerns. It was part of a broader plan to privatize and redevelop this lake for personal profit. I held up one of the large photos I'd brought, Melinda's son fishing at the lake with a cooler of beer, dated and timestamped. Then I held up another, her party, her guests, all violating the same rules she used to fine others. What you're seeing is selective enforcement. Manipulation. A long-term attempt to reshape this community in the image of a few, at the cost of many. Melinda tried to interrupt, stepping forward and raising her voice. This is an illegal power grab. The HOA has recreational use rights. I nodded. Correct. But those rights expire in 28 days, and as the new property owner, I have opted not to renew the agreement. More murmurs. I could see the wheels turning in the crowd's collective mind. And before you ask, no, I'm not closing the lake. In fact, I'm opening it, to everyone. With one exception. I paused, looking straight at Melinda. Current HOA board members who were involved in the fishing ban, the fines, and the redevelopment proposal are temporarily restricted until a full community vote is held to elect a new board. No more secret amendments. No more fines for lawn height or bird feeders. We fix this together, or not at all. The silence that followed was thick. Melinda's mouth opened and closed like she couldn't decide whether to scream or faint. Samuel stepped beside me and gently took the mic. 4 years. This community has been ruled by intimidation and favoritism. That ends today. We're organizing a transitional council. All financial records will be reviewed. And we'll ensure that no child is ever bullied because of HOA politics again. As the applause started, Melinda took a step back. Her zoning friend had already begun walking away, clearly wanting no part of this mess. She turned on me one last time, her voice shaking. You think you've won? You think this little show changes anything? I looked at her with complete calm. It's not a show. It's your curtain call. She didn't respond. She just walked away, faster than I'd ever seen her move, her clipboard swinging wildly with each step. The rest of the day was filled with laughter, conversations, and cautious optimism. People began asking questions, forming groups, volunteering for committees. I saw Eli teaching a younger kid how to bait a hook, and my chest tightened with a quiet joy I hadn't felt in years. That night, as the last of the tables were folded and the sunset spread gold across the lake, Eli and I sat on the dock. So it's ours now, he asked. The whole thing. I nodded. Not just ours, buddy. Everyone's. But yeah. We made sure it can't be taken away again. He leaned against me, small and warm, and whispered, "Can we fish tomorrow?" I smiled into the fading light. Every day if you want. No more permission slips. No more fines. And in the silence that followed, broken only by the soft splash of a jumping fish, I finally felt like we were home. In the days that followed the community cookout, the ripple effects of the revelation began to crash down like waves against a crumbling seawall. Melinda Braxley, once untouchable and smug in every HOA meeting, now found herself the subject of whispering neighbors, abrupt door slams, and an inbox full of angry emails. People who had once silently accepted her rule were suddenly emboldened, no longer afraid of the woman with the clipboard and the endless fines. I watched it all unfold with a quiet satisfaction, not because I wanted chaos, but because it was the first time I had seen the community awake and aware. The HOA board scrambled. 2 members resigned within 48 hours, citing unexpected family emergencies. One posted on the neighborhood forum claiming she had never supported the fishing ban and was only following procedural advice. Screenshots of her emails fining residents told a different story. Janine, Samuel, and Tony, now acting as the informal transition committee, scheduled a public town hall at the community center to discuss restructuring the board. No more closed-door meetings. No more hidden agendas. This time, everyone was watching. But Melinda wasn't finished. That much became clear when I received a knock on my door from a city inspector. He carried a clipboard, a measuring tool, and a laminated badge that looked too freshly printed to be legitimate. According to him, my back deck might be in violation of city code due to a missing permit from years prior. I asked for the original complaint. He said it was anonymous. I asked for his supervisor's contact info. He shifted uncomfortably and muttered something about a follow-up visit. It was laughable, obvious retaliation. I sent the footage from my doorbell camera to Samuel, who forwarded it to a friend in City Hall. Within the day, the inspection was deemed unauthorized, and the man was removed from the permit rotation list. Still, it proved Melinda was trying to fight back using whatever remnants of power she could access. But each move she made only deepened her hole. Things got worse for her when one of her former allies, likely trying to save their own skin, leaked an audio file to the local newspaper. In the recording, Melinda was caught discussing ways to creatively cite residents who had spoken out at meetings and how to handle the transition committee if they got too vocal. The article dropped like a bombshell. The headline was simple but devastating: HOA president accused of targeting residents in Lakewood Ridge power struggle. Residents who had once avoided taking sides now picked one. And it wasn't hers. When the next HOA meeting rolled around, the community center was packed wall to wall. Chairs were filled, people stood in the back, and some even spilled out onto the front steps listening through open windows. Melinda sat at the front of the room, flanked by the last remaining loyalist on the board, looking like a general whose army had deserted. Samuel stood and took the floor with calm authority. "Before we proceed, let's address the elephant in the room," he said. "There have been multiple claims of improper conduct, abuse of power, and misuse of HOA fines. Tonight, we vote to audit the HOA's finances, restructure the board, and open nominations for leadership from any homeowner, not just a select few." The vote wasn't even close. Nearly every hand went up. Only 3 stayed down. Melinda's was one of them. When the motion passed, the room burst into applause. It wasn't loud or chaotic, it was purposeful, cleansing. Change had finally arrived. That night, I received a handwritten note in my mailbox. No name, just neat cursive on plain white paper. It read, "You gave this place its soul back. Thank you, for the lake, and for reminding us that we matter." I didn't know who sent it. Maybe I never would. But it meant more than I expected. Meanwhile, I finalized my plan to protect the lake permanently. With help from Brian, Samuel, and a land conservation advisor, I created a legal trust that transferred ownership of the lake and surrounding land from Trident Holdings to the Lakewood Ridge Community Trust. It came with strict guidelines: no private development, no HOA control without a 75% community vote, and permanent public access for all residents and their children. It would never again be used as leverage or power play. It was now what it should have always been: common ground. When we hosted the first official Community Lake Day under the new rules, it was unlike anything I had seen here. There were fishing competitions for kids, kayaks drifting lazily under the afternoon sun, and residents bringing home-cooked dishes to share. Eli ran the bait station with Lana, showing kids how to cast without losing a finger. Janine organized the food table, Samuel manned the welcome tent, and Tony led a small safety demo on lake use. I stood back and watched, arms crossed, heart full. Not with pride, but with peace. A kind of internal stillness I hadn't known I was missing. Around sunset, as people began packing up, Melinda showed up. She wasn't dressed in her usual polished style, no clipboard, no sunglasses, just a plain blue sweater and jeans. She walked along the path silently, drawing glances but not attention. When she reached me, I braced myself. But she didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She just looked at the lake and said, "I didn't think you'd really do it." I studied her for a long moment. "You mean by the lake or change the neighborhood?" She shrugged. "Either." There was a beat of silence before she added, "I lost everything because of this." I nodded once. "No. You lost everything because of how you treated people. I just gave them the chance to see it." She didn't respond. She just stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked away. I didn't watch her leave. 2 weeks later, she quietly sold her home. The buyer, ironically, was a young couple from out of town looking for a peaceful community to raise their first child. They toured the lake and signed the contract the same day. The house sold at market rate. No discounts. No fines. Just a fresh start. The irony wasn't lost on me. 1 year after the day Melinda fined me for fishing, Eli and I stood once again on the dock. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting orange streaks over the still water. He cast his line out and leaned into me with that same comfort I'd seen return to him these past months. "Do you think people still hate her?" he asked. I thought about it for a moment. "I don't know. Maybe. But that's not what matters." He reeled in a tiny perch, grinning. "Then what does?" I looked out over the lake, at the houses glowing gently in the dawn light. "That we stood up. That we built something better. And that no one can take it away again." Eli smiled and nodded. "Then we won." I nodded back. "Yeah, buddy. We did." And as the water rippled under the soft morning breeze, I finally felt like the world, just for that moment, was exactly where it needed to be.